Your new Muslim comes to you and says to you that, well, now that I'm Muslim, what do I do about my house? I heard that interest is forbidden, but I bought my house on a mortgage and I'm still paying those repayments. What happens now? Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. The issue of riba is something which, of course, not just affects new Muslims, but I think far, far more the already born and existing and long-term Muslims, and even very practicing Muslims. There seems to be this shameful, frankly, idea that when it comes to the acts of ibadah, like ritual acts of worship, fasting and hajj and salah and zakah and so on, then we're really on top of that and so on. But when it comes to money matters, then Allah is forgiving and He's merciful, and we don't need to really kind of worry too much about our finances and so on. And that's why you'll find so many practicing Muslims shockingly still involved in riba transactions, taking loans from the bank, taking out conventional mortgages for their homes, renting out homes and buying them on mortgages and so on and so forth. So let's not leave any doubt in our minds. Let's make it very, very clear and give a straight message. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu taqullaha wa dharu ma baqiya min ar-riba. O you who believe, have taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and get rid of that which is from riba. Leave off riba completely, in kuntum mu'minin, if you are indeed believers. فَإِن لَمْ تَفْعَلُوا فَأَذَنُوا بِحَرْبٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ. And if you do not do that, if you do not stop taking riba and getting involved in riba and being part of interest in all of its forms, then take notice of war from Allah and His Messenger. This, of course, is the only time in the Quran, in fact, in the Deen, that we know of such a stern, harsh warning that you are under threat of war from Allah and His Messenger from those who get involved in riba. And let me make it very, very clear that riba here is every single increase upon your principal sum when you give out some money. When someone lends you some money and you give extra back, or the other way around, even if it's 1 pence or 1 cent extra, it is called interest. And I say that because, of course, interest has always been, any single increase upon the principal sum has always been prohibited in all of the religions, in Judaism and in Christianity and in Islam. But of course, there's such a temptation, it's such an easy way to make money. You're always going to be able to guarantee a return of your money by muscling away, by using people to force you to pay, or by using the authorities to blacklist you and all that credit kind of nonsense. So you will be forced to pay that money back. So people know that you're always going to have to give money back that they loan to you, and the government is going to be behind them, that the regulatory kind of services are going to be behind them. So then the easy way to make money is to increase the amount that you're going to have to pay back. And that was obviously such a temptation for the other religions, or the people within those religions, that they changed the laws themselves and they created a new concept. They said, well, actually, what's impermissible is usury and what's permissible is interest. You might think, what's that supposed to mean? What's the difference between usury and interest? Well, as I said to you, any interest, any sum of money that's an increase upon the principal sum, even by 1 penny, that's called interest. And that's what's impermissible. What these guys introduced is the concept of usury, where they said if it's unreasonable and it's a large amount, so we're talking 10% increase, 20% increase, that's what's impermissible. And that's called usury. And interest is anything which is insignificant, 1%, 5%, 3%. And so they allowed the taking of interest and the charging of interest, but they said we won't go as far as usury. In our current kind of banking climate, actually both are all mixed up. There's different charges for different transactions on credit cards. Some of them charge 5%, 10%. You can get some short-term loans and they're charging you 50%. The whole field is a mess. It doesn't matter. From an Islamic point of view, any single increase upon the sum of money that's been lent to you is interest and impermissible. Therefore, it is utterly impermissible for a Muslim to go to a bank and take out a conventional loan or conventional mortgage. Now, some of the people will say, well, this is for my residence. I need a home for my family. family. I need security and stability. And of course, there are different kind of cultures that govern this. In different societies have different ideas about house ownership. And certainly in the UK, which is where I am, then that's seen as a very important thing. And there are other places like, for example, some of the European countries where they have huge numbers of people who rent, and home ownership is not so important. And in America, it's different, and so on. So there is a cultural and societal thing there as well. When it comes to the issue of whether one needs to own the house, we know that actually it's permissible for a person to, not just permissible, but it's quite possible for a person to rent a home and live quite comfortably and not have any kind of issue. So why don't we just tell everyone to rent their own homes, and that's the end of the story? Well, the answer to that, of course, is that it is an argument that the money that you're paying in rent, which is sometimes often actually more than what you would pay is if you had taken a loan to purchase your house via the concept of a mortgage, is something which is a lot more, causes a lot more difficulty, and it's dead money. Dead money in that actually nothing else comes as a result of it. You just pay and there's no actual final asset at the end of the day. And the scholars thought and discussed this and so on and so forth, and they wanted to try and understand, do we obligate a person to go and rent a house, or do we try to give them a way out in terms of purchasing? Is to have a solid house, your money to not be wasted in this manner, is it what we call from the necessities of life that we can give some concessions for in the religion? And the scholars differed over this issue. Remember that we're talking about two things now. We're talking about the permissibility now of actually taking a conventional mortgage, which in principle is haram, and about a new Muslim who comes to you with an existing house which is already purchased by a impermissible conventional mortgage. Let's deal with that first. Anything which a non-Muslim does during his non-Islam, his kufr, his disbelief, is something which happened then and is not held accountable for at that time. So now when he becomes Muslim, he is now in a state where he's not punished for what he did. What he's now accountable for is what he does now. Now he's in a situation, let's just play this scenario out, that he's paying another 10 years of interest payments upon his house. He has two options. He either continues paying this sum of money, or he will have to find the sum of money, the remaining £50,000, for example, and pay it off so that the mortgage is finished. He doesn't have this £50,000, and maybe if he sells every single thing that he owns, maybe he gives up his maybe he's a taxi driver and he sells his taxi, or maybe he's a shop owner and he sells his shop, then he'll be able to get that lump sum of money and pay off that remaining sum of money, and therefore he'll have nothing left to he'll owe nothing more to the bank, and that's the end of the story. What we now have to answer is that, is he obligated to do that? Does he need to absolutely right this very second stop? The answer is that if he has the ability to, then of course that is the right course of action, and that is the best outcome. But are we going to obligate upon a person? And I'm not even now talking about a new Muslim. I'm even talking about those that have been involved in this for a long time. And this is, of course, more common. Those who are not practicing, suddenly they do start practicing, and now they're into now they're far more aware of the requisites of the religion, and that they're not allowed to now take riba, and they realize that they've been paying this haram mortgage. Do we say now that you have to suffer financial hardship? And as someone who helps these people by listening to their cases nearly all the time, not exclusively, if we insist upon a person to pay off the remaining lump sum of their mortgage, they are going to suffer financial hardship. It's going to put their family under strain, put their relationships under pressure, and they will lose, and this is the key, a source of income which is their actual livelihood. Like, for example, as I said, selling the shop which is bringing in their daily bread, selling the taxi which is their annual income, which they actually use and rent out, and they drive themselves to make their money. Are we going to force them, or are we going to say, brother or sister, make this a priority of yours to get this paid off? You've started it now when you want aware of it, and now you're in it. Now get rid of it as quick as you possibly can. Yes, that is my position. That is my fatwa. That's the fatwa of my teachers. That's the fatwa of the major scholars. This person does not need to absolutely 100% put himself under financial hardship to get rid of the problem that he's in. Of course, if he's able to do that and he has access to funds, he's got a few properties on the side, he's got a few businesses, he's got a few sources of income that he can get rid of, then he must do that. Otherwise, then he will be held accountable, or she will be held accountable, that she's not getting rid of, or they're not getting rid of this haram action of taking riba. And I just want you to know something, that the Prophet ﷺ did actually make it very clear. لَعَنَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صلى الله عليه وسلم آكل الرِّبَا وَمُؤْكِلَهُ. That the Prophet ﷺ cursed the one who insists on interest, i.e. takes it from the people, he gives them a loan, takes it back, and then he eats it. Basically, akul riba means eat it, meaning that he's profiting from the interest himself. And the one who pays back the interest as well. Because some people might think, I'm the oppressed one, why am I being punished? Well, actually, it's very clear. You're part of the system. If you refuse to play ball to this horrible system of interest, then there wouldn't be a problem in the first place. But you are part of it. You are wanting that money for one reason, whether it's a correct reason or not, but you are part of it. It is actually correct to say that the sin is not the same. It is correct to say that we cannot hold the bank to the same level, accountable to the same level of the miskin guy who's buying the house. He's sinning. He is involved. The hadith is very, very clear. The Quranic ayah is very, very clear. But we will not say that he is to be punished like the same as the one who is actually enforcing upon a person and insisting upon interest. So what we will say is that this is the lesser of the two sins involved in this, and that because that he is not abusing and oppressing other people, this is just a sin with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because the one who's insisting upon interest is sinning against Allah and sinning against the people. He's taking the right of Allah and the right of the people, whereas the one who's paying the riba in their repayments in conventional mortgage is only sinning against Allah. I say only just to give that context. As a student of knowledge, you should be able to understand these phrases when we mean only and just. We don't denigrate the concept, we're just trying to differentiate. So this person is not the greatest sinner that you can imagine when it comes to a riba. And they've made the commitment they're going to get rid of it. And they've made the commitment that as soon as they come across funds, we're going to pay it off. And so we should be positive in that sense. So what I'm giving the answer to is the one who requests some time and some help in order to get rid of this problematic situation that they found themselves in. We will give them that. We will not insist upon them to sell their main source of livelihood. And if they did, then we will congratulate them and make dua for them, because they've taken a great burden upon themselves if they get rid of their main source of income just to get rid of riba. This is a praiseworthy action. We will encourage them. We will make them feel good about it, because there's nothing as horrible as a person doing this for the sake of Allah and then you turning around and saying to them, well, to be honest, bruv, you could have done it after a year, or you could have waited a bit of time. No, we are only saying that for those people who say, no, I can't pay off now. No, I can't do it. We're giving them a lifeline. So I want you to understand the difference, that if a person's willing to do this and make this sacrifice to get rid of riba, then riba is serious enough for that person to make that sacrifice. Back to the person then who has taken this situation on before he was non-Muslim. That was something which he's not held accountable. Now he should get rid of it as soon as he can. But let's make it very, very clear. If someone was to come up to you now and says, I want to now take an interest mortgage for a house, then we have to now be very, very careful and say this is completely impermissible. You either go and rent a home or you go and look for an Islamic alternative. On the issue of Islamic alternatives, of course, there are different countries that have developed systems and others don't. America, Canada, and most of Europe do not have the kind of privilege of those in the UK, for example, where there is an offering. There used to be a lot more back in the day, but then unfortunately the Muslims, when they got involved with these schemes, and this is straight from the horse's mouth, I know these people personally, they took serious advantage of these concessions, Islamic mortgages, and abused it, and they started to do fraud. And it led to the banks losing out on such a lot of money, or the Islamic wings of these banks, and so they got rid of these programs and these schemes, what we call the musharaka, murabaha, and mudaraba, and all of these various Islamic and modern Islamic finance terms, which have been created using classical principles, slightly kind of engineered to produce a contract which is possible to be used for the purchase of a home. The best of these is what we call al-musharaka al-mutanaqisa, meaning what's called a diminishing partnership, where you go into partnership with the bank. This is something which does exist in the UK, and we understand that it will spread to other places as long as the Muslims respect the actual rules of the game and the institutions who are offering it. So I want to say that with these alternatives, it is permissible to take this, and certainly in the UK, people will ask, and I believe that it is permissible. The Sharia Supervisory Board, the scholars that are actually sitting over this scheme that's offered in the UK by one or two Islamic banks, I believe that they are qualified and they have cleared this. I have seen it, I am happy, and I trust them to have cleared the nitty-gritty of details of the contract. Yes, there are some questionable matters. Yes, we are being slightly more flexible or slightly more relaxed, I guess, when we're reading these contracts and looking at their reality. Because in an ideal situation, we wouldn't have certain clauses and certain conditions, but because of the fact that there is no other alternative, because of the fact that the industry is fledgling in its nature and there is a need, then this is an alternative that we will promote, as opposed to going to the clear riba-based conventional mortgage option. So I hope that you understand what I've said. In principle, it is not permissible whatsoever to continue in a conventional mortgage repayments, but if the need be that they cannot repay the money back, then let them continue, let them make istighfar. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inshallah will forgive them because of the need. If a person wants to establish and buy a house brand new, then let them avoid conventional mortgages, let them try and rent, and if that's not possible, then use the Islamic mortgage options which are available. And possibly, I will end, that if the person is unable to achieve the conditions, for example, the very high levels of deposit that are required for a conventional Islamic mortgage, and it's out of their reach, and therefore they are forced into a scenario where they have to go to a conventional bank, then on an individual basis, it is possible for a mufti to give, and a mufti meaning someone who's qualified to give fatwa, a senior scholar, to give an individual fatwa for that person in need due to the necessity of having a house. That's possible. Scholars have given it, and I'm not going to close the door to that as well. But that needs to be taken on an individual basis and not something general as an episode like this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.